Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new PennyWise podcast from Lee Enterprises. I'm your host, Teri Barr. Question for you to start this whole discussion off. How's your savings account looking right now? Ouch, I know. Okay, so there's a new study, and it shows 4 of 5 Americans are actually now choosing to reallocate their savings. The big question, why? We are going to get some answers and some ideas from our guest today, Chanelle Bessette. And Chanelle is a banking expert with NerdWallet. Chanelle, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
Okay, let's take a look at this big question, the why. So, what are these issues right now kind of surrounding our concern about savings accounts?
So it's no secret over the last year and a half or so, there's been a lot going on in the world that has been greatly affecting the economy. So as the pandemic hit people pretty hard in the wallet and, affected employers, the government, international trade, there has been a lot going on in terms of consumer goods and bank accounts. So interest rates have been pretty low over the past couple of years. If you have a savings account, you probably got some notification from your bank saying, hey, we're dropping savings rates for now. We just can't keep up with the current rate. And then, of course, inflation has been a major issue throughout 2022. And the government has been beginning to respond and has been increasing the federal funds rate, which has basically trickled down to consumer accounts, and interest rates are now going back up. But our study is focused on why or how consumers were changing their savings habits over the past couple of years or so.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of that. And let's dive into the study then. Pretty interesting stuff there. What do you think you found as far as trends for people dealing with their savings accounts?
So it seems like a lot of folks were probably getting a little disillusioned with low interest rates,
Yeah.
and we're kind of focusing more on top of mind financial issues. Perhaps they had to dip into their savings accounts in order to cover basic expenses, or inflation maybe hit home where they're living, and they've decided to dip into their emergency fund or their rainy day fund in order to cover the cost of gas these days, or
Right.
taking trips where plane flights are more expensive. So things like that have been happening, and people have been deciding, like, maybe I can just spend my savings and deal with what's in front of me instead of thinking more towards the future. So we found a lot of people were just kind of changing up where they were keeping their savings, whether that's spending their savings or just moving them to different things.
I also read a portion in the survey where some people decided to move their money into checking accounts, or even to just say, forget it, I'm just going to keep my cash at home. How do you feel about those thoughts and those decisions by people?
Yeah, I'd imagine folks were probably moving into checking accounts so that they could spend that money more readily.
Ah,
But I am, yeah, as confused as you are about the idea of keeping cash at home. I imagine there's probably a sense of security that comes from having your cash on hand. Something were to happen suddenly with the economy or with your bank. It's just nice to know that you have that bundle of cash, I imagine. Although from an expert perspective, the idea of keeping cash at home is a quick way to lose the value of your money because
yeah.
you're not earning anything on it.
I know. Remember the old school, like, oh, our grandmothers or great grandmothers put it under the mattress. Now, I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing to do these days, but it does make you think.
Mhm.
What about some other options? The big talk, of course, is cryptocurrency, but does that bring a lot more risk?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic because we did find in our survey that about 25% of the
Ah,
respondents were starting to look into cryptocurrency and invest in cryptocurrency as an alternative to saving. And then that same percentage, about 25%, were also investing in stocks or mutual funds in order to try and I imagine they're just trying to buy stocks at a discount since the stock market has been pretty low lately. So those kinds of options, maybe it feels like it's time to buy low and potentially sell high later.
ah,
Um,
yes.
but of course, it is a much riskier idea than keeping cash in a savings account.
Now, you mentioned, as we've been discussing the study and savers using the money due to inflation, of course, all these higher prices. I think your study showed 1 in 5 basically moving the money to use it. Does any of what we've been talking about so far surprise you?
It's hard to say because it's definitely kind of a unique situation that we're all in right now. I don't imagine most of us have lived through a global pandemic before now, and with things going on in geopolitical potential issues over in Europe, there's just a lot of uncertainty, and it kind of seems like folks are very much focused on the present and what their money can do for them now, as opposed to thinking long term.
Right.
So I think that dips more into kind of social psychology or individual psychology of how folks are responding to that. So unfortunately, it's not my field of expertise, but I've been keeping an eye on the baking industry, and there have been a lot of interesting things happening in the past year or so.
Absolutely. So, do people overall still have savings accounts?
Yeah, it definitely seems that people are holding on to savings,
Okay.
the accounts themselves. The cash is really the question, is where people are moving it around. But it's probably a lot easier to just take some money out of your savings as opposed to reach out to your bank and fully close the account.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my gosh. What do you think is the thing that you found most interesting from this study?
I think the consumer behavior has been really fascinating. As I mentioned, that's not something we typically are able to get numbers on at my job, and
Right.
so we have to do these studies to really get like a encapsulated view of how consumers are responding to financial and economic and world trends. So just seeing those numbers was really interesting to me. And of course, with low interest rates, people have been trying to react in the best way that they can, and that's kind of to live in the moment and pay your bills, or just try and like combat inflation however you can, or maybe just like spending more money. Maybe it just feels easier to do that now that lockdown isn't as much of an issue for a lot of people these days.
Right.
So really looking into all that was really the other side of the coin of the work we typically do.
Okay. Well, on that note, let me ask you, what do we do? What should we be watching? Is there something we should be watching right now?
Yeah, so the Federal Reserve is really trying to combat inflation by
Mm.
raising what's called the federal funds rate, which it's kind of more on the back end of banks, like what they do behind the scenes overnight. A lot of banks will borrow and lend money to each other. And when the federal fund rate goes up, that means it's more expensive for banks to do that. And besides that, when it comes to consumers, like what that ends up meaning is that consumer loans, like mortgages, auto loans, things like that, the interest rates on those go up. But it
Yeah.
also means that interest rates go up on checking, savings, and certificates of deposit. So it's kind of a dual thing where it's harder to borrow, but it's easier to make money on your money. So that's been going on this year already. But it
Yeah.
sounds like the Fed is going to be meeting to potentially hike rates again, maybe even later this month. It's June currently, and it might happen later this year too. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on in the banking industry as a whole, just to see how interest rates might go up or down.
Okay. Yeah. So, what would you say is the bottom line for everybody?
So at this point, when it comes to keeping your money somewhere, you're going to have access to it, earn interest on it. It's relatively stable and not as volatile as, say, cryptocurrency or the stock market. Um, it really comes down to what kinds of deposit accounts, like checking, savings, or CDs, that you want to keep your money in. And interest rates are going up way more than they have in the past couple of years. Over at NerdWallet, we keep track of those rates every day, and we see them
Yeah.
going up and constantly doing updates to our site to make sure we have the right rates. So at this point, I would just say consumers ought to do as much research as they can and comparison shop as much as they can to see what kind of rates they could get, and to not be afraid to potentially move your money to a different bank if you think you're going to get more bang for your buck over there.
Okay. Just be a smart consumer and just keep your eyes peeled on what's happening.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Wow. Anything else to add before I let you go? This has been a terrific conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. Well, just throw another plug in there. At
Yeah.
NerdWallet, we do update these rates a lot, and we do lots of roundups about different banking products. So you can look at 10 to 15 banks at a time to see what the rates are, to see what the features and details of these different products are. So if you are in the market, we have lots of resources for you.
Excellent. I don't think there's ever been a better time to kind of dive into all those things too as a consumer. Chanel, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Teri.
Yes. And this is another new PennyWise podcast for you. You can find all of our podcasts wherever you enjoy listening. We thank you for being here with us. From Lee Enterprises, I'm Teri Barr.